cares if one more light goes out? I do. That's my son, Jools Sweeney, known as Jools, who died in April this year. Most of you will know me as Roome from the finance room. However, tonight I stand here talking for the very first time since my son's funeral as a bereaved mother and talking about raising awareness for mental health. I've also not long broken my leg and I cannot do heels, so sorry. That's much better. I'm going to ask you a question. Who in this room has a child, a niece, a nephew, a cousin, a child that they care about? Put your arm up. Who has a child that actually you think about and you care? And then you imagine losing them. Well, trust me, it's truly, truly horrendous. And as a parent, you often think how it would be if a child died, and then you take that out of your mind and you don't go there. When it actually happens, it is horrendous. Sorry. When Jools died, I wanted to make something positive out of this hugely horrendous, unbelievably imaginable situation. And whilst I don't know for certain Jools had mental health issues, it certainly wasn't obvious to anybody. I do now know that there are so many children struggling. So let me tell you a fact. In the UK, mental health affects 1 in 4 people. It's the biggest single cause of death of under 35s. I never knew all this. So let's say there's 300 in the room here tonight. That's a quarter of you, 75 of you. There's what, maybe 10 on a table? So that's 70, I don't know, my maths should know better, shouldn't I? I haven't got a calculator. But that's a quarter of this room who will be affected by mental health. Now, if you can imagine 2,500 school children sitting in a school hall, that's 625 children in one school that will be affected with mental health. So I also would like to add in here, if anybody needs help for them or a child, please find me. There is help out there, but you might not know where to approach yet. I'm going to tell you a little story. 13th of April 2022. It was a beautiful day, the sun was shining, the grass was green, and you could smell flowers, the birds were singing, there wasn't a cloud in the sky, and all was good. My partner Barry, who's with me tonight, and I were merrily going horse racing with Sam, who's somewhere also here, at Cheltenham, and her husband. We had a lovely day, we laughed, we ate a meal, we watched Risk and Roll Horse come third, we went up to the Royal Enclosure, we had champagne. It was a lovely day. Throughout the day, Sam and I both regularly spoke to our children to check what they were doing. Normal things. He was playing football with a group of friends, climbing on a small boat on a pond, then he started a fire pit. Of course, Jools being Jools, said, "I couldn't start it, Mum, so I used your nail varnish remover." Oh, how I wish he'd burnt himself that day. He had eaten pizza with his friend, and I mentioned there were marshmallows and they were toasting around the fire, and I said, "Please be careful, don't hurt yourself. I'll be home in half an hour." So Sam and her husband and Barry and I went to a lovely wine bar in Cheltenham. I had a nice cheese board, lots of wine, both rang our children. And Sam actually recounted to me tonight how we were passing the phone round, they were all chatting, everything was fine. Jools' friend left our house at 8:46. An hour and a half later, we arrived home at 10:13. Bearing in mind he was almost 15, I didn't think this was too late to leave him on his own. I went straight up to his room. Normally, being a typical teenager, he probably was sitting in his pants, playing Xbox, laughing, and FaceTiming his friends. And then he'd probably say, "What's in the fridge, Mum? Have you got anything I can eat?" Well, when I walked into the room, that was not the case. I thought at first he was joking. His light had gone out. Jools was a happy child, and we talked openly about everything under the sun. But on the 13th of April at 10:13, I walked in to find him hanging in his bedroom. It doesn't only affect close family and friends. The ripple effect is massive. And since this hideous, awful, devastating night, and particularly in the early days that followed, many of my son's friends arrived at our door to talk about him, which was actually really nice. But from those many conversations, I've learnt there are so many children who struggle, or maybe don't even know how to explain the words. Should be a bit more organised. Someone said it's a bit like being on a roller coaster with a friend, alongside you, about to start the same ride. One of you is really looking forward to it, and the next person is terrified. Julian's the one on the bottom right. He was terrified, but when we got to the bottom, he said, "Let's go again, Mum." You don't always know how you're going to feel. And children don't know how to explain they feel, whether they're anxious, nervous, excited, or terrified. As adults, we often don't know exactly how we feel, but how are children able to explain how they feel? Another explanation is it's a bit like a big ball of different colour string, all mixed up, and children are trying to understand by picking out the colour of how they feel. Anxiety, excitement. It's a lot to learn as a child. We need to get kids talking and not label it, but talk about how they feel. In those early days after Jools died, I was told by one of his friends that there were 10 people in his class that were suicidal. I later repeated this frightening statement to the school, who said, "Well, we know of 5. My response was, "You need to make damn sure who the other 5 are." Jools and I used to have this little thing where we would pinky promise, linking our little fingers together and saying we had to be truthful and always say what was on our mind. For example, "Jools, have you been smoking because you smell the smoke tonight?" "No, of course not, Mum." And I'd say, "Do you want a pinky promise on that?" Since my first post on LinkedIn after Jools died, I had 4.2 million views and something like 8,000 emails. There was a lot of, "Do you want to develop your SEO?" But there were a lot of people who also lost their children, and I've learnt about so many children that are self-harming. This shouldn't happen. We shouldn't outlive our kids. Also, statistically, 65% of people who lose a child go on and take their own life. There's been a lot of publicity in the press recently about Molly Russell and Archie Battersby, and it's become obvious that there really isn't enough discussion and teaching in school about depression, which can lead to suicide. It is also obvious that social media must change, as far too many children are self-harming and far too many are taking their own lives. But this isn't just the school's responsibility, that's all of our responsibility. Everybody in this room, to talk to children, but to listen to them. If by taking action we can save one person's life, then it's worth doing, which is why I've set up the Pinky Promise along with Julian's dad, to make a difference. If we can save one life, then something positive will have come out of something truly devastating. Words cannot express the depth of pain a child causes, and the ripple effect catches brothers, sisters, cousins, grandparents, friends and family. It is massive. There's an online petition to persuade government to incorporate such teachings in school curriculum. Please sign it. A close friend of Jools once said, "If this had happened to somebody else, you would have sat down and talked to Jools, wouldn't you?" Yes, I would have done. I know that many mothers and fathers have done since, so please sign this. If somebody had had this conversation with Jools, would things be different? There are no words to express the all-consuming grief and loss I feel for my son, but I will make a difference for the sake of other people's children. I want to get into schools and talk and raise awareness about how children feel, emotions, whatever. Just prevent suicide. I don't want any other parent to have to go through our nightmare. So I stand here before you broken, truly broken leg and ankle, and ask for you to help me. In the magazine on your table is a link to our Just Giving page. At the moment, it's a crowdfunding page, as we haven't finalised things for the Charity Commissioner, but I assure you that every single penny will go to children and their families to help them. There's plenty of you in the room that know me, and you know my determination and drive. And those who don't, watch me. I will make a difference. And going back to all those children you raised your hand for, saying that you cared or thought about, go and talk to them. Talking about suicide doesn't cause suicide. I will love you forever, Jools. I pinky promise.